What the hell is going on with Brandon Aiyuk? Is he having separation issues on the field? And is it hurting his quarterback? Also, Matthew Stafford, Brock Purdy, two guys dealing with having to, you're missing your two stars. What is that going to look like in this upcoming game? And also, which team is more hurting to start this year? A potential 0-3 start by the Rams, a potential 1-2 start by the 49ers. I have Alex Lopez joining me this morning to discuss all that and more on the Eric Crocker Morning Show. Let's go.
Intercepted. It is picked off by Eric Crocker over midfield. He'll run it all the way into the end zone. Touchdown.
Cross Talk TV podcast. Peace.
Welcome to another episode of the Eric Crocker Show. I'm your host, former NFL and AFL defensive back. And of course, this morning, we're talking all things San Francisco 49ers and trying to dive into this narrative that's going around about Brandon Aiyuk. Is he having separation issues? I watched the film. We're going to dive into that. Again, Brock Purdy, Matthew Stafford, and really the start to the season. But first, I definitely want to thank all of you for tuning in, and make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button. And my dog is throwing me off because I think he's farting or something. I don't know if he has bad gas. Romeo, what's going on, bro? Like that smells. All right, so my dog, he's expelling gas, but we're going to stay focused on what's going on. But first, I want to thank you guys. And, of course, let you know that this show is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Make sure you guys download the Underdog Fantasy app or go to UnderdogFantasy.com. Use promo code Crocky for a deposit match. And when I say this is not a typo or this is not misunderstood. For a deposit match of up to $1,000. So if you put $50 in, they'll match it and they'll give you another $50. You have $100 to mess around with. If you put $500, they'll match it. Now you have $1,000. If you put $1,000, they'll match it and you have $2,000. I haven't seen anyone else doing that. It's only Underdog Fantasy. They got the best live play. So make sure you guys, Underdog Fantasy, download the app or go to UnderdogFantasy.com and use promo code Crocky. All right, we got the chat going up. I see Bree Marie in the chat. I see Roland in the chat. Let's go. We got the flames and everything. Let's go. Brian J. We got Chris. He says, what's up to all the casuals out there? All right. And someone that is not a casual, we're going to bring on the show this morning. And welcome, Alex Lopez. Alex, good morning.
Hey, good morning.
All right. So, Alex, I've been seeing you around, the 49ers landscape, watching you at games, taking your little cool pictures with the field in the backdrop. How deep does this 49ers team run in your blood? Like, how long have you been a fan?
I'm born and raised. I grew up going to Candlestick Park with my family. My parents have had season tickets for longer than I've been alive. So it kind of just grew, that love. It started with the Gold Rush cheerleaders, of course, and getting my cotton candy at the games. And then as I've gotten older, that love has just kind of blossomed to the team.
Awesome. So do you have like an all-time favorite player?
Man, that's so hard. I mean, I'm going to say right now, it varies, of course. Right now, I'm going to say Frank Gore just because he got inducted to the 49ers Hall of Fame.
All right, now here's the big question, because I get pushback on this sometimes. We've had conversations about this, not recently, but I'd say in the past couple of years. In your eyes, you talked about him being inducted to the 49ers Hall of Fame. Will he be inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame?
I hope so. I feel like he deserves a place there, but you know how, man, it took I feel like an arm and a leg to get Patrick Willis to that point. So I'm like, maybe one day with Frank Gore, but I think it's going to be a while. I want it. Trust me, I want it, but I think it's going to take a minute.
Yeah, and the crazy thing, mentioning Patrick Willis, they have two kind of polar opposite kind of starts, or not even starts, just careers, right? Like you have one guy who has the longevity, like Frank Gore, playing as many years as he did, ultimately putting him at number 3 in all-time rushing yards in league history. But he wasn't quite the player as Patrick Willis to his position. So Willis at, certain times, even though it's for a short period of time, I mean, most years, best linebacker in the NFL, like 100% best linebacker at the top, first team All-Pro, 5 or 6 times, or 5 times first team, 1 time second team All Pro in 8 years. Like it was magical. It was everything that you think a Hall of Famer is. And
Mhm.
while not having that same career, Frank Gore, I don't think he was ever considered outside of maybe year 2 a top 3, top 4, top 5 running back in the league. Always really good. Always really good. Played on some bad teams that may have had something to do with it. But I just
Right.
never felt like, oh, Frank Gore, best running back in the league. So I don't know what the standards are now to get into the Hall of Fame. I thought that you had to be the best or top 2, in multiple years stretch to be like the Hall of Famer. But maybe it's just longevity, and
Right.
they get a guy like Frank Gore in there because he did do amazing over a career. So I just had to ask you that. But Frank Gore, great, great guy. So
Yeah.
real quick, let's get into the show now. So I know you have some show topics that we're going to talk about.
Yes, and you said it at the start of the show. What the heck is going on with Brandon Aiyuk, Crocky?
All right, so I've been seeing this floating around on my timeline. People are throwing these stats out, and they were throwing out these separation numbers. And it's like, oh, the 49er receivers, they're not getting any separation. Look at this lack of separation. And Brandon Aiyuk, he's the lowest. And I'm like, wow, like Brandon Aiyuk having separation issues? Like that's not like him. I'm used to seeing Brandon Aiyuk, separating from guys, getting open, getting wide open. So I went and watched the all 22. I was up late one night and I'm watching all 22. I'm like, damn, he's getting open to me. At least that's what it looks like. I mean, I see a lot of separation. So now I'm confused because I don't know how this metric is used. But I went to social media, and really my thoughts were just to kind of calm the spirits of 49er fans. I know it's tough after a loss. I'm like, hey, I can't speak for all the receivers because I focus solely on Brandon Ayuk, but he's definitely getting separation. And that's when everybody was like, oh no, look at this number. He is not getting separation. And then come to find out the separation number that is calculated by whoever, these guys that do these stats. It's only when you're targeted. So Brandon Ayuk on throws where he was targeted, he didn't get a lot of separation. Now, clearly it didn't matter because he caught 4 out of the 5 passes that were thrown at him. And the one that he missed, he actually was wide open, but Brock Purdy held onto the ball just a little too long, rolling out to his left. Wasn't able to get the ball into that window, and it was incomplete. So Brandon Aiyuk was getting open, and even when he didn't, he still caught the ball that was thrown to him. So for me, I didn't quite see an issue with his ability or inability to be an open target for the quarterback.
Right. Well, do you think the timing is off between Brock and him? Like, this is what listen, I don't have any place in talking about the schemes, in talking about separation. That's just not my thing. But I want to learn more about it. So, do you think, just as a fan, I'm watching, I'm like, okay, I see that he's getting open, but what's going on with this like timing between them?
I think some people may look at that with the timing. What I always go back to is scheme. All right. We had conversations about Brandon Ayuk and the contract that he was potentially signing, with the 49ers. And I'm like, I don't think the 49ers want to pay him a ton of money. People are like, well, why wouldn't you? He's the 49ers wide receiver one. He was so productive last year. And I was like, well, Kyle Shanahan doesn't care if he throws the ball to him 3 times or if he throws the ball to him 10 times in a game. All Kyle wants to do is run his scheme. And if his scheme and the plays and the concepts dictate that the ball goes to Brandon Aiyuk, then cool. But it's a lot different than some of the other teams, right? So a lot of people had an issue with, uh, Brandon Aiyuk, he's making $30 million a year. You can't come out. You can't be sluggish. You can't have a slow start. All right. But when I watch, I'm like, well, he's getting open. But if that's not where Brock's read is, then he's just never going to get to Brandon Aiyuk, even if he's open. So Kyle Shanahan, the way he calls his offense, it's all based off of concepts. And really, it's more plug and play than people want to admit. So whether you have Brandon Aiyuk out there or you have, let's say, Ricky Pearsall, whoever is at that spot, they're going to run the same routes. It's going to be the same play. Now, maybe one guy can execute it a little bit better, but overall, I'm going to be asking you to do the same thing if you're in this position because this is my scheme and this is how I want to run it. A lot of teams that are paying these guys a lot of money, That's not how their schemes and systems are made up. It's more created around a receiver. So we can use CD Lamb. I always like to use that example because if you watch a Dallas Cowboy game, you could see it right away. But CD Lamb, they do any and everything possible to get the ball in his hands. They're gonna have him on the left side. He's gonna motion to the right. He's gonna motion to a bunch formation, tight split. They're going to create the concepts based around trying to figure out how to get the ball in his hands. That is not Kyle Shanahan. So although I know a lot of people have these heightened expectations of what Brandon Aiyuk should be from a production standpoint, I would say that don't, don't look at it that way. Just look at what he does with his opportunities because of how Kyle Shanahan calls plays, the opportunities can really come and go depending on the game. Maybe a matchup, maybe something that Kyle feels like he could take advantage of, but it's never going to be predicated solely on trying to force feed or feed the ball to Brandon Aiyuk.
Mm. Do you think that might change though this upcoming week with Debo being out and obviously CMC not being there?
A lot of times when I look at the 49ers in certain ways they do things, like I'd see certain matchups and be like, oh, yeah, they should definitely take advantage of this matchup. They have this guy and this guy. So I think that, like, oh, yeah, now they're going to definitely utilize Brandon Aiyuk more. And there may be some more targets that go to him because guys are out. But even then, I still feel like it will be within the context of the offense. And for Brock Purdy, let's say Brock Purdy's back there. And I'm not saying Brock Purdy is a robot, but when Brock Purdy lines up, I don't think he's looking at, all right, let me see. Okay, I got Brandon Aiyuk over there. Okay. Okay, there we go. I'm going to hit Brandon Aiyuk in his window. I think he's looking at, all right, here's the defense. What are they giving me? Okay, it's a single high. This ball says that I should go to Kyle Juszczyk. And he's just going to throw the ball to Kyle Juszczyk. And I think he finds that answer quick in his brain, pre-snap, post-snap. And that's not him. I know a lot of people want to say system quarterback, but yeah, he runs the system very well. And it has made it to where it's one of the most efficient offenses in the NFL. And he's doing a terrific job at the quarterback spot. But I don't think he's doing a great job because, it's dictated on, well, we're missing Debo. We don't have CMC. So now I have to get the ball to Brandon Aiyuk. Nope. I think he's going to go out there and do what he always does, which is find the correct place to go with the ball, predicated on what the defense gives him. And we're not talking about Brock Purdy right now, but clearly against the Vikings, he had some issues with that. And it wasn't issues on Brock Purdy being like this bad player or anything like that, but really more so on not knowing what he's getting from the defense, not knowing what he's seeing. Maybe pre-snap, he's like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, I know I want to go to Debo Samuel on this based on what I'm getting. But then they start moving around and he's like, oh, snap, this is not what I was expecting. Pump fake, oh, dang, and he takes a sack, right? We saw some of that. Hopefully, he's not getting those same looks against the Rams. But again, I don't think it's ever in this offense going to be dictated on, all right, hey, on this play, no matter what, we are looking to Brandon Aiyuk. That's just not how that goes. So I don't even think that's going to change with Debo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey being out.
Yeah. Okay, I want to ask this as well because I've been seeing a lot of that same kind of discourse on Twitter. Do you think that people and the fans are trying to take some blame off of Brock Purdy by putting it on players like Brandon Aiyuk?
I feel like there has been some coddling a little bit of Brock Purdy. He has done so many things well, and he's been so consistent, and he's been so good. And the one time maybe you point out something like either in the area he can improve, or maybe something wasn't that great, everybody resorts in like hating on Brock Purdy or trying to dump all the problems of everything on Brock Purdy. And it's like, nah, dude. Yesterday I got accused of trying to defend a $30 million a year receiver and basically like scapegoating him to hate on Brock Purdy because I was like, oh no, like Brandon, he's getting open. Like when I watched all 22, he's getting open. They're like, oh, you just hating on Brock Purdy. I'm like, bro, I didn't even say anything bad about Brock Purdy. Like what I say, like if anything, I feel like I prop up his ability to run the offense and find the answers without having to force it to one guy. But that's not to say that this, Brandon Aiyuk isn't getting open. So I do think that there's like this sense of people feeling like they have to protect him. I saw the same thing with Jimmy Garoppolo. I was one of those too, like where I would defend Jimmy Garoppolo because I felt like the media always attacked him. Other fan bases attacked him. And I'm like, man, like, why y'all hating on this dude? He wins. He playing at a high level for the 49ers. They're going to the playoffs every year, that he's playing multiple, that's playing most of the games. Why is everybody always down on Jimmy Garoppolo? I think people do the same thing now for Brock Purdy because I do think that a lot of people are still curious, like, is he that guy? Like, is he the guy that's really going to take these things to the next step? We saw Jimmy Garoppolo. We saw the success 49ers had with Jimmy G. We saw some of Jimmy G's numbers. It feels different or it looks different with Brock, but I do feel like a lot of people still they feel like they got to protect him all the time. Like, what do you think? What are you? Do you have this sense of having to defend him, almost like if it's one of your kids? Like, my kids is always like, oh, my kid can do no wrong, and maybe a parent said, man, your kid is hella bad. I watch your kid do this, and he has good grades, hell of an athlete, but he got a little attitude. You feel like, no, I got to defend my son. How dare you? Do you think that there's some of that going on with Brock Purdy?
100%. I think I almost feel like I'm the number one culprit of like, no, like it's Brock, you're okay. Like, I try to put him on the pedestal. And like, a lot of people, I did that with Jimmy too. And it took me a while to kind of get out of that mindset. But there are a lot of things I do think Brock is different at than Jimmy. But I feel like at this place, at this point right now, I feel like I'm doing it. I'm seeing it more often. Like, and even people, it almost irritates me when people come in my comments and it's like, oh, well, Brock and Jimmy are the same. There's no difference.
How does that make you feel when they say that?
I'm very frustrated with it. Like, this is the thing. It's like you said earlier. It's like when you have like certain stats written down or like objective things, like for example, oh well, they both went to the Super Bowl and they didn't win. It's like, no, no, no. Let's look at the context of what got them to this point. Like, let's look at their actual stats, maybe from the fourth quarter of who is actually more in a position to get the team to win compared to the other.
Yeah. And I've been like this defender of Jimmy Garoppolo. And when I say defender, it's weird because when he was on the team, I remember there was this tweet I put out, and I was like, man, they're paying Jimmy Garoppolo all this money. You don't know if he's going to be hurt or not. And even when he plays, like, does he truly take like the players, the offense to the next level? Like, he's not, a Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, and not saying he has to be those guys, but just a really big time like game changer. And I remember tweeting out one time, like, dude, give me Taylor Heineke. I think Taylor Heineke in this offense can do what Jimmy Garoppolo does. And I got killed by 49er fans. I mean, killed. They were like, how dare you, Taylor Heineke? Jimmy is a winner. Like, look at how his teammates love him. He's a great leader. And then, shoot, come to find out, once he got kicked to the curb by the 49ers, he goes to the who did he get benched by?
With the Raiders.
Raiders. Goes to the Raiders, gets benched. And now, if you ask 49 fan base, oh, Jimmy Garoppolo was terrible. He was always super bad. I'm like, that's not what y'all was saying when he was on the team. So I think 49er fans in general, and this is probably not just 49er fans, this is probably every fan base. They always feel the need to protect their own. And I think that's what we're seeing with Brock Purdy as well.
100%. All right, I kind of want to switch gears now because let's look forward to this upcoming game versus the Rams. I know that there's a lot of conversation going on about how the Rams have a lot of injured players. So with Matthew Stafford and Brock Purdy missing some of their key weapons, what do you think is, what do you expect to see from both of these quarterbacks?
I think I think it's a little tougher for Matthew Stafford than it will be for Brock Purdy and the 49ers. The 49ers, you take away CMC, it's like, well, we still got three other all-pro weapons, right? You got Deebo Samuel, you got Brandon Aiyuk, you got George Kittle. Heck, you even got another all-pro now with Kyle Juszczyk because I think they added the fullback position. You have an all-pro guy protecting your blind side. So now, you got to take away Deebo too. It's like, well, Still got Brandon Aiyuk out there. Still got George Kittle. Still have Juszczyk as a weapon. And obviously, we really like, Juwan Jennings and what he's done for this team. So for the 49ers, there's still a lot of talented players, really good weapons where I feel like, okay, you're losing some key guys and guys that I feel like the 49ers definitely build their offense around, but you can still be more than serviceable as an offense and keep things going. And I do think it adds a little bit more on Brock's plate, but the guys are there to keep things going. For Matthew Stafford, though, I think it's a little different. I don't think, you don't have a Jordan Mason replacing your, CMC still running for over 100 yards a game. Right now in the backfield, they have some guys decent, but can they take the pressure off of the quarterback when he's missing two of the better receivers in the league? Puka Nacua was breaking records last year as a rookie receiver. And if he wasn't all pro, he definitely was a Pro Bowl receiver. Like, he was very good, very talented. Well, you lose him week 1. And then week 2, we find out Cooper Kupp. Now he's being placed on IR. So you're missing your 2 guys who were really going to have to carry the Rams. I thought the Rams would be number 2 in the NFC West behind the 49ers, based on coaching, based on Stafford, and really based on those 2 receivers. I didn't think that their defense was necessarily going to be great. I didn't think that the run game was going to be awesome. I know they added Blake Corum to go with Kyron Williams, and it's like, okay, these running backs, they can run the rock, but they're not. Are they like game changers? I don't think that. I think they were complementary pieces to the passing game because they want to come out and throw the ball. But now you lose those 2 pass catching weapons, and you have to depend on these 2 running backs who aren't quite game changers. I think that puts the Rams in a really tight spot. So looking at this game and the quarterbacks and what they have to deal with, I'd be very disappointed if the 49ers came out of this game with anything less than getting a W.
No, I feel the same way. I think even going into it, and this might make me a bad NFL fan. Listen, or you could say I'm a good Niner fan because I don't know too much what's going on with the Rams. But other than Puka Nacua and other than Cooper Kupp, I was like, who are some star key players for the Rams? And honestly, I couldn't think of any for Matthew Stafford. So I agree. I'm like, we still have Brandon, we still have George Kittle, we still have Kyle Juszczyk, we still have Juwan Jennings, and of course Jordan Mason. So I definitely think if we don't kind of push forward, then I'm going to be a little bit more concerned.
So are you concerned potentially with the outcome of this game? You have 2 teams heading into this game. One team that's 1-1, the other team 0-2. So you have a potential 0-3 team with the Rams, which I was not expecting at all, but also a potential 1-2 team with the 49ers, who just lost on the road to the Minnesota Vikings, led by Sam Darnold. And then now you're going to the Rams, which it's still a home game, Levi South. That's what we call it.
Levi South, yeah.
But do you have any doubt that the 49ers will come out of this game with an L or with a W?
This is my take on it. Is I think we come out with a W. If we don't, and this might be, I don't think the sky is falling. And I say this because I understand you want to win as many games as you possibly can, because then it gets you the division title. Then it gets you, okay, you're going to be NFC champions. Okay, this, that, and the other. But this is the thing. We had those key steps, right? We went 5-0 last year. We were the division champs. We went to the NFC championship game and won. We went to the Super Bowl. All these key steps that we went to go do, and we did them, and we still didn't get the ultimate goal. So I also think of the 2021 season where we went, 3-6, and we snuck our way in, and we were still able to get to the NFC championship game versus the Rams. So I don't think the world is ending if we do lose, but based on everything, I expect us to come out with the W.
Yeah. Now, do you think that this game is more important for one team or another? Obviously not ideal for either team to lose this game, but 0-3, I should have looked up the numbers for teams that start 0-3 and their chances of making the playoffs. But 0-3, that sounds disastrous. I even think for the 49ers starting 1-2, and I think the 49ers have the Patriots next, so all right, maybe you just get back on track versus them, but you want to go 3-1 after a Patriots game. You don't want to be having to go 2-2 because you lost to a Rams team on the road, quote unquote,
Yeah.
with a lot of their stars missing. So, is there one team that you feel like this game is more important for? Like, is it more important for the Rams or is it more important for the 49ers to come out of this game with a W?
I'm gonna say I'm trying to be objective. It's really hard for me, but as you could tell, Niner fan. Um, but I mean, you're right, like 0-3. Like for the Rams, I would say it would be a little bit more difficult. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it'd be catastrophic for the Rams because only are they going 0-3, they're starting to lose a little bit of their wiggle room. For a division that looks much improved. I don't know if we all had these expectations for the Cardinals, but watching how the Cardinals played Week 1 against Buffalo, they played well enough to win that game. The offense was ecstatic. They had a nice return for a touchdown, and then come out Week 2 and they're just throwing haymakers, and that offense is clicking. And Kyler Murray looks like the top 10, top 7, top 8 quarterback that people thought he was a few years ago. So that's a scary team in the NFC West. You look at the Seahawks, and I don't look at the Seahawks as scary, but we see that, hey, they can turn it on. They can play good. They can win games. So now when you're the Rams, a team that was expected to potentially be, finish second behind the Niners, if not first, some people were saying, oh, I think the Rams are going to win the division. But to fall 0-3, I think that would be really catastrophic. Again, the 49ers, you want to win this game. But all right, you start 1-2, but then you go to, or you play the Patriots, you win that. You're back at 2-2. 49ers have been in this position before. I think that between the two teams, this is a huge, huge, huge must win for the Rams. Now, again, I forget the Rams. I want to see the 49ers win, but it's definitely a must win for the Rams. I'd say even more so than the 49ers.
I'm curious, what key things do you think we got to do? Because I was talking about this yesterday on my podcast. I'm going to plug myself in. Um, a big concern for me is red zone offense. So I'm curious, what do you think are key things that will get us to this point? And you're right, I'm not too concerned about their defense, but what are some key things do you think that would get us to have an easy win?
I think forcing takeaways. When you're playing against a team that you are on paper at least better than, it's doing things to really just kill all hope, all confidence. And the last thing you want to do is give a team what we call false confidence, right? That's like the feeling of, hey, kind of hanging around. We weren't really expecting to be hanging around. I think we can win this game. Then all of a sudden, guys that maybe haven't played to a certain level, they start turning up. They start growing confidence. They start making plays. You want to strip all that from the Rams. So if you are the San Francisco 49ers, you want to come out. And I think one of the key things that they need to do, obviously there's the main things, win in all three phases of the game. You got offense, defense, special teams, which I thought they lost all three of those last week. With having a punt blocked, send up a short field, muffing a punt return, right? Like those things aren't ideal for the Niners, but you want to start off this game, get a takeaway, force Matthew Stafford into a throw he doesn't want to make, throwing blind, throwing an interception, make that play early, and then you have to capitalize on it offensively. And I felt like the 49ers against the Vikings, that was one thing they didn't do. They got the takeaways. Fred Warner's, picking off passes, forcing fumbles. But how many points are you getting off of that? And I think that was where the 49ers went wrong. I think in this game here, you have to not only get the takeaway, but you have to really capitalize on the Rams' mistakes. And we've seen this. I remember going back to the 49ers are playing the Rams on primetime television. This is when they still had Jimmy Ward, Elijah Mitchell. Elijah Mitchell ran the ball like 27 times in this game. But the 49ers won by double digits in a game where I think a lot of people are thinking, oh, I think the 49ers might lose this game. Well, they won 31-10, something along the lines of that. And a big part of it was Jimmy Ward. He had 2 interceptions in that game. He played lights out, but he took the ball away. And what it do for the Rams and their confidence? man, they shut down for the rest of the game. Like it wasn't even competitive. So I think in this game, when you're missing Cooper Cup, you're missing Puka Nakua, I think the 49ers got to come in, punch him in the mouth, force a takeaway, capitalize on it. And I think that will be like the big thing to really get the 49ers in the position to where they get kind of the ball rolling, get that confidence, that swagger back, and you see them really run away with this game.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. With our defense doing that, who do you think the star player of the game is going to be? Do you think it's going to be Fred again?
I think Fred Warner is the easy answer.
Answer?
I want to dig a little deeper,
Yes,
like
yes.
let's go with, Jair Brown. This is a guy who maybe didn't have a great performance last game. He kind of was a part of giving up that 97-yard touchdown, eyes in the backfield just a little too long. They were able to, get behind him on the throw to Justin Jefferson. Then he outruns everybody. There was some poor angles, I felt like, right? But one thing I noticed about him when he was at Penn State, and he was only in college at Penn State for 2 years. He was actually a junior college transfer. He led the nation in takeaways in the 2 years that he played. So nobody in the nation had more interceptions over the 2 years that Jair Brown was at Penn State than him. All right. So this is a guy that has a knack for making plays. We watched it last year. He had an interception in the Super Bowl. He had another interception in the regular season. I think this is a guy that needs to get his swagger back, and it starts with this game. And a lot of it is making that one play. Then you start to see his confidence kind of like, okay, got a little bounce in the step. And then I think he's going to make another play. So I'm going right now, defensive player of the game, Jair Brown.
I love it. I love it. And definitely, I think he needs to build that confidence back up. I've been seeing a lot of little jabs to him on Twitter. So that would be really good if he kind of came out with a bang.
He definitely has to do that. Here we go. We got a couple questions in the chat. We got pockets, or not even a question, just a statement. But something that we touched on to start the show. He says, trash receivers with no separation has been Juwan Jennings getting open, showing a person open after the ball is thrown doesn't mean they are open. We did kind of address this, and I think this is as content creators, as people who, and not me, I'm not like a team reporter, but there are some people reporting. I think it's our responsibility to paint a certain picture for the fan base while looking at the scope of everything, because I do think that at times there are guys that want to create certain narratives, and I'm not like big on that. Like, hey, this is what's happening, this is what I'm seeing, or whatever. But there are some people that they want to paint these certain narratives, and they leave out certain context. So the thing about the separation has been going around, and I don't want to make it seem like I'm blaming Brock Purdy, but Brock Purdy, the separation number is more indication of how do I say this? Is more indicative of who he's throwing to. So if he has his mind predetermined that he's throwing to a certain guy, and he does that well, even if it's tight window throws, Brock Purdy does it just as good as anybody in the NFL. So he's throwing tight window throws. People make it seem like, oh, well, guys aren't getting open because he's throwing it. Well, that's just where he decided to throw the ball. That doesn't mean that these other players are not getting open. So, we used Brandon Aiyuk as an example because it says trash receivers, no separation, only Juwan Jennings getting open. There is videos. If you go to, I retweeted, but shout out to my guy KP, Kyle Posey. He posted this. He's showing so many reps of Aiyuk running open, and not just after the throw. He's open. But if that's not where the quarterback is reading, if that's not where, that's not part of his progressions, he's likely not going to get to it. So how do you change that? Well, let's make Brandon Aiyuk more focal point on offense. We discussed this ad nauseum at the start of the show. That's not what Kyle Shanahan does. So I get it. Everybody, they're kind of looking for someone to blame. Ultimately, is maybe the Vikings just did some really good things and forced Brock into some tighter window throws. They forced him to throw the ball where they felt like, hey, if we give him this look, he'll throw the ball here. And it ended up being tighter window throws than what he was expecting. And so maybe it's not Brock, maybe it's not the 49ers. Maybe the Vikings defense just played very well. And that could be it too.
Yeah. I was going to say too, like, I feel like this, and every year we go through different narratives, right? And I feel like to start the season, this is the big one, or right after the Super Bowl, this was the big one that has kind of been everywhere.
Have you I didn't check it out, but I know I saw some clips floating around, and it was Debo Samuel, Brandon Aiyuk. They're on the podcast. Debo got a podcast now. All right. But they're asking about that. He feels like, man, we've had these great teams. We know what we have to do, but like it's win now. Like win now or never, dang near. Do you feel like the 49ers kind of have that kind of pressure on them to where and is that maybe what we're seeing, maybe being a little bit more tense with certain things? Is there are they putting too much pressure on themselves to win a Super Bowl? Or is the 49er fan base putting that pressure on them? Well, how do you feel about that? Because it almost feels like the players, they feel like this tension heading into the season.
Yeah, I think that's a really big thing, especially like so many years of we're right there, we're so close. I definitely think it's a combination of the pressure that they're probably putting on themselves and definitely the fan base. Like I've seen so many The Last Chance, The Last Dance, like over and over and over. And I think based on like maybe them being on social media, I have no idea how they take the fan comments or things like that, or even maybe like reporters that go and talk to them. I definitely think that pressure is on for them, especially when you kind of realize this team is not going to be this team for much longer. What about you, Crocky? What do you think?
I love that you brought up how, not knowing how the players, do they see these things? I try to explain this. Okay, so when I signed with the New York Jets, right? I was a fan of football. At this age, I was older. I was like 25 years old, 24, 25 years old. I wasn't like this superstar player in high school. Shoot, I barely played game. I was ineligible most of the time because of grades. I went to junior college route. I went to two different junior colleges, went to Division two, went to the Arena League, then boom, I find myself in the NFL. So I am a fan. I'm a 49er fan, like diehard. Um, but I'm on this team, and it's these guys that I've been watching for years, right? Like, I was, as 6'2", 200 pounds, like I was considered a bigger cornerback. And I watched a lot of Antonio Cromartie. Well, now Antonio Cromartie is my teammate. I had watched a lot of guys like Tim Tebow. Well, now Tim Tebow is my teammate. So I was going in there thinking, and Revis, somebody said Croctop Revis had a lot. Darrell Revis, he was another guy like who got traded shortly after me being there. But I'm seeing all these guys who I'm so used to, watching on TV, and I'm thinking like they're bigger than life, like man, these guys are so. But you walk into that locker room, and the first thing I realized, they're just like us. The only difference is they have more money. So whatever a normal person does, right, Alex, whatever you do, whatever I do, whatever anybody in this fan does, they do the exact same things.
Mhm.
Their mind works the same. Their emotions are the same. I think sometimes people hold athletes to a higher standard because they make more money, kind of like the Brandon Aiyuk thing, right? Like, whoa, Brandon Aiyuk's making all this money now. You shouldn't only catch 4 passes on 5 targets, right? Like you should be going for 100 yards every game. Like, well, nah, like he can only do what he's given as far as opportunities. And these fans, the players, they think a lot like the fans. They feel the same thing. So that was the thing that really resonated with me right away. And I was like, oh man, these guys are just like me. They just got more money. So they see everything. The fans, everything that the fans are saying, they're just like we're scrolling through Twitter and we're reading everything, they're reading everything as well. They all got Twitter. They all have Instagram. They all follow my guy Brad Graham on the SF49ers. They're going through the comments. They're reading the comments. They see everything. And maybe there should be somebody that says, I think Jimmy Garoppolo actually did a great job of this. I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo was on social media at all. So hey, I don't hear any of the noise y'all talk about. I don't see the fans. I don't see anything like that. I just go out there and play. I think maybe more players should delete all social media and just go out there and play. But it's easier said than done because Alex, if I ask you, hey, Alex, delete your Twitter, delete your Instagram, you're gonna be like, hell no, I'm gonna delete my stuff. And I think that's players as well.
Yeah. No, and also, like, nowadays too, like, social media plays such a huge role in, like, this community now. Like, it didn't used to be like this. And also, like, I'm thinking of also, like, Brandon Aiyuk's extension. I feel like, he used, like, things, social media, Instagram, and he used it to his advantage to kinda try to get something going. So, before we didn't really have to worry about that, they didn't have to really worry about that, and now I feel like it's kind of a part of it.
It feels like it's a huge part of it. And someone in the chat, here we go, great one, 765. I think he's spot on. Social media helps players build their brand. So there's a lot of that going on too. You know, some guys have cameras following them around. You see the workouts, you see the training. Uh, the brand is big. I'll say this about building a brand, especially now. It's more prevalent than any other time. Building the brand, I see these guys have these. Shoot, Travis Kelsey and his brother. Everybody says, hey, stick to football. You shouldn't be doing podcasts. Debo, you shouldn't be doing podcasts. Aiyuk and all this. Man, the Kelsey brothers just signed $100 million contract to
Crazy.
podcast. That's outside of whatever they're doing for football. Who wouldn't potentially want to build that type of opportunity for themselves? Now, everybody ain't the Kelsey brothers, right? But just in the sense of finding something that you enjoy doing, you talk about, you get to control your own narratives and put out there how you think about certain things, but also post football because football don't last forever and the lifespan is short. I think the average career is 3 years. Shoot, I was there not even that long. There's some guys that played 10 years, but at some point it ends. And a lot of these guys are figuring. I coach with guys that played years in the NFL. My guy Desmond Bishop, he played 9 years, I believe. Lavelle Hawkins, 6, 7 years. Well, they're in their 30s, and now they've been. I think shoot, Lavelle's been done since he's been done since 28 years old. So like, boom, I don't have a job now. Like so building a brand helps even that transition. Finding out what it is that you are able to do outside of playing football. And a lot of these guys, for most of their lives, that's all they've ever done since they were, 6, 7 years old, playing flag football and then Pop Warner. All they've ever done is play football. And then in their early 20s or at some point, it comes to an end. So building a brand outside of football player, finding yourself, things you enjoy, being able to talk about the sport, whether it's on social media, which helped me, I think it's really big for all of these guys.
Yeah, 100%. 100 you're right, I would not be able to delete my Twitter. I think that's the one thing I could not first of all, I would not be able to do, but also, like, I think of, like, tough losses, like, me getting on social media, that's the only time that I will, like, "Okay, bye, Twitter. I don't wanna see you."
And I think they would like to ignore it during those times, but if I had to guess, probably be very, very difficult. All right, well, hey guys, that's going to do it for this episode of the Eric Crocker Morning Show. Alex, man, I thank you so much for coming on here. Let everyone know where they can find you and your podcast as well.
Thank you for having me today. This was amazing. You can find me on Twitter at Alexandra Lopez. And then Instagram is Zipuela. And then my podcast is called Crave. And my segment is all about the 49ers.
Let's go. All about the 49ers. And that's what this is right here. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, and also, again, Underdog Fantasy. If you haven't already, download the app. Go to underdogfantasy.com. Use promo code Crocky. It helps the show. Until next time, I'll see y'all. Peace. Oh, Friday. I think Coach Desi will be here Friday. We're going to be talking about injuries and all that stuff. So I'll see y'all Friday. I'm out. Peace.